Picture this. In the not-so-distant future, the entire world economy just stops. Not because of a pandemic, not a Wall Street crash, but because of a conflict in a tiny 21-mile stretch of water. This is how the 2026 Hormuz Crisis brought the world to the brink. All right, so let's jump right into the heart of it. The month is March 2026. A regional conflict suddenly boils over, and it effectively slams the brakes on one of the planet's most vital arteries. So in the first few days of March, after a whole series of military strikes and counterstrikes, Iran makes this absolutely stunning declaration: no ship may pass through the Strait of Hormuz. And just like that, for weeks, this critical choke point was pretty much closed for business. And the impact? Whoa. It was immediate and almost total. The number of oil tankers passing through the strait every day plummeted by a staggering 95%. We're talking about traffic going from around 130 ships a day down to just a handful. It was a complete and unprecedented stop in the flow of global energy. You can just see the economic panic right here on this chart. I mean, with nearly a fifth of the world's oil supply suddenly cut off, the price for Brent crude absolutely exploded. It jumped from about $69 a barrel in February to a peak of almost $120 in March. As you can imagine, markets went into a total tailspin. So you have to wonder, right? How can this one narrow strait hold so much power over the entire global economy? Well, to really get it, we need to zoom out a bit and look at the geography. Okay, so the Strait of Hormuz is the only way for ships to get from the Persian Gulf out into the open ocean. That's it. At its narrowest point, it's just 21 miles wide. You've got Iran on the northern coast and Oman and the UAE on the south. There is literally no other way in or out by sea. This is why people call it the planet's energy superhighway. A massive 20 to 25% of all the world's seaborne oil and about 20% of its liquefied natural gas, LNG, has to pass through this tiny choke point every single day. And look, this goes way beyond just oil. This is where it starts to matter to you and me. It's absolutely critical for the LNG supplies that heat homes all across Europe. It's essential for global food security because it carries about 30% of the world's seaborne fertilizer, and it's the main energy lifeline for Asia. We're talking China, Japan, India. A staggering 4/5 of the energy leaving the strait heads east. So the big question is, how did we even get here? How did a tense situation just completely spiral out of control into a global crisis? Let's walk through the timeline of how this all went down. It all happened so fast. On February 28th, the US and Israel launched a massive air assault on Iran called Operation Epic Fury, citing concerns over its nuclear program. Iran's response was incredibly swift. For the next 10 days, it fired missiles, launched drones, laid mines in the strait, and broadcast that stark warning to all ships. By early April, China and Pakistan managed to broker a fragile ceasefire, but things were far from over. The US then turned around and imposed a blockade on Iranian ports. Okay, so you have the military conflict happening, right? But the economic shockwave that this sent around the world, that was a whole other story. Let's look at the devastating ripple effects. Suddenly, the risk of sending a ship anywhere near the region became almost unthinkable. I mean, check this out. War risk insurance premiums for just a single tanker trip through the area skyrocketed by as much as 20 times. So a voyage that might have cost you, say, $40,000 in insurance now cost over $500,000. And with supply lines completely choked off and these costs just exploding, you can imagine the chaos in the global financial markets. Nobody knew when or even if the energy would start flowing again. The word on everyone's lips was tailspin. So the really crucial point here is that this wasn't just about the price of oil. Major shipping companies suspended all their routes through the Gulf, paralyzing supply chains. That led to shortages in really key things like fertilizers and petrochemicals. Economists started projecting that domestic inflation would rise by 1 to 2 percentage points. And for countries that are super dependent on energy imports, like Japan and South Korea, this became a genuine national security crisis. So with this really fragile ceasefire in place, the world was basically holding its breath, standing at a very dangerous crossroads. Let's take a look at the 3 potential paths that everyone saw for the future of Hormuz.
All right, so analysts basically laid out three ways this could go. You had the best case scenario, the ceasefire holds, traffic gets back to about 50% of normal, and oil prices kind of settle down around $80 to $90 a barrel. Then there was the more likely case, a fragile truce with occasional fighting, which would keep traffic at just 20% and prices stubbornly high, between $100 and $120. And then the worst case, a full-blown war. The strait would be completely shut, oil prices would soar towards $180, and that would absolutely trigger a deep global recession.
The whole crisis of 2026 was just a brutal reminder of how fragile our interconnected world really is. It leaves us with this one massive question. With the global economy hanging by a thread, can diplomacy ever be enough to unblock the world's most critical artery for good?